in the city's underbelly, where harsh neon lights danced on rain-slick pavement and the hum of secrets vibrated beneath every cracked sidewalk. The night bore witness to a crime so distorted and raw that it shattered the delicate equilibrium of an already broken justice system. On that fateful evening, the world would come to learn of a judge once revered for upholding the law, whose darkness spilled over into a realm of betrayal and calculated murder. Under the weight of midnight rain and flickering street lamps, Detective Marcus Alvarez found himself drawn into a labyrinth of corruption and sorrow, where every whispered confession seemed to slice deeper than the last, leaving behind nothing but stained memories. The initial report, a frenzied telephone call in the dead hours that echoed through empty corridors, detailed an unspeakable act. A beloved stepmother had taken the life of a young girl who had dared to see through the gilded veneer of deception. In a moment captured by security cameras and hastily scribbled notes, the victim, Claire, a bright-eyed adolescent with dreams yet untainted by darkness, was seen stepping into a world of lie and treachery. The evidence was as damning as it was mysterious. Court documents scrawled in trembling ink and later broadcast in harsh headlines revealed that the same woman who had once adjudicated the fates of many with an iron will was entangled in an illicit liaison with an inmate, a scandal that not only defied societal expectations but also brought shame upon the very institutions she had sworn to protect. The voiceover of the ongoing investigation crackled with urgency. Voicemail, 2:32 a.m. The call that changed everything. In that voicemail, a trembling witness spoke in hushed tones of a hidden romance and a betrayal that defied the natural order of family and law. Marcus's own inner monologue, haunted by echoes of past failures and the moral ambiguity that had dogged him for years, warned him that this case was a puzzle of paradoxes. As he navigated a maze of grim police reports, dimly lit corridors of the courthouse, and clandestine meetings in back-alley diners, the detective discovered a tapestry of secrets. At the center of it all was Judge Lydia Marlowe, a woman whose icy poise in the courtroom belied a turbulent tempest of inner corruption. Lydia was a master of dual identities, by day a steely arbiter of justice, and by night a participant in a dangerous affair with a notorious inmate known as Cyrus Cyanide Delgado, whose own notoriety was eclipsed only by his insatiable appetite for chaos. In quiet moments, as the rain hammered on her stately mansion and memories of a seemingly charmed past threatened to resurface, Lydia recalled the way power had seduced her, twisting her morality until she no longer knew where her duty ended and her desire began. Meanwhile, an unsuspecting family, fractured and barely holding together under the weight of hidden sins, became unwilling actors in this unfolding tragedy. The father, a man burdened with his own shortcomings and secret vulnerabilities, had become the scapegoat for a web of lies so intricate that even his closest confidants struggled to see the truth behind the facade. His every gesture, every whispered conversation with his estranged daughter, was reinterpreted through the lens of betrayal and guilt. As Detective Alvarez began piecing together the disjointed narrative of shattered lives, flashbacks poured in like fragments of a broken mirror. The memory of a soft-spoken young woman, Claire, whose eyes still glimmered with the naive hope of youth, tormented him. He remembered how she had once confided in a friend about glimpsing her stepmother's hidden phone messages that hinted at clandestine meetings and secret rendezvous in the twilight hours. "I just saw it on her phone," Claire had murmured to a friend in the schoolyard, her voice barely above a whisper. Something about meeting someone I never expected. That confession, recorded in the silent echoes of the past, reverberated in Marcus's mind every time he passed the cold, austere walls of the courthouse. In a series of long, sleepless nights, he pored over photographs, security footage, and hastily written statements, slowly mapping a web of relationships that spanned the corridors of power and the darkest corners of the prison system. His investigation took him to rundown neighborhoods where the stench of neglect mingled with the promise of redemption, to upscale enclaves where polished floors concealed festering lies beneath. He began to unravel the chronology of events, the timeline of secret meetings between Lydia and Cyrus, clandestine calls made from burner phones in desolate motel rooms, and the fateful night when Claire had confronted her stepmother with eyes that shone with a mix of betrayal and desperate curiosity. The detective's inner voice, equal parts cynic and believer, questioned the paradox of a woman who wielded authority in a courtroom, yet could not control the chaos swirling within her own home. How do you police the truth when the truth itself is twisted into a weapon, he mused during one particularly bitter night. The answers, he suspected, lay hidden in the confessions of reluctant witnesses and the whispered testimonies of neighbors whose lives had been upended by the scandal. In dimly lit interview rooms, where the only light came from the staccato blinking of a recorder, survivors of the familial collapse offered fragmented pieces of their experiences. A longtime neighbor, an unassuming figure burdened by years of watching life unravel from the quiet safety of her well-kept garden, recalled in a trembling voice, "I always thought there was something off about them, a tension I couldn't quite place until that dreadful night." As Marcus began connecting these fragments, he saw patterns emerge, like dark constellations in a stormy sky. The intersection of professional ambition, personal failure, and the insidious lure of forbidden attraction. Through layers of media distortion and personal truth, the narrative of a seemingly simple murder case evolved into a sprawling epic of deceit, retribution, and moral decay. An archival document, yellowed with the patina of secrecy, surfaced among a box of discarded evidence. It contained scribbled notes in a hurried script, a confession of guilt, fear, and a desperate plea for escape. The handwriting, though shaky, bore the unmistakable tremor of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. "I never meant to hurt her," the note read, leaving behind an ambiguity that only deepened the mystery. This was the start of an inexorable downward spiral, one that led from hushed rumors and forgotten alleyways to the glaring spotlight of a televised trial. In quick succession, news reports began to flood in, each more scandalous than the last. Journalists with a penchant for dark irony coined nicknames and speculative headlines, reducing the complexities of human passion and cruelty to bite-sized, shareable fragments on social media. "Stepmother judge killed, stepdaughter who found out about her affair with inmate and framed the father," screamed one such headline, its words echoing in the hearts of those who had once believed in the sanctity of the judicial system. Yet, even as the case dominated public consciousness, the truth remained elusive, tucked away in layers of obfuscation and the carefully orchestrated misdirection by those who wished to protect their reputations at all costs. In hushed, almost ritualistic interviews, Detective Alvarez recounted his growing realization that every answer led to more questions. "We are often our own worst enemies," he admitted during one recorded session, his voice catching on the raw edges of regret and disillusionment. "Sometimes the people you trust to protect you are the very ones tearing you apart from the inside." With each new piece of evidence, Marcus found himself questioning not only the layers of the case, but also the very foundation of justice itself. The boundaries between right and wrong became blurred in the rain-soaked streets and fluorescent-lit courtrooms, leaving him to confront a realization that was as brutal as it was inevitable. In the modern urban landscape, truth is not a linear narrative, but a shattered mosaic of conflicting perspectives and irrevocable choices. As the investigation pressed deeper into the inner lives of those involved, long-forgotten grudges and hidden sins began to resurface, painting a picture of a world where every smile masked a lie and every act of kindness hid the specter of betrayal. The relentless cadence of revelations, punctuated by the intermittent flash of a witness's tearful confession or the staccato replay of a damning phone recording, drove home the tragic irony of it all. The judge, the emblem of impartial justice, had become an architect of her own undoing. Even as the city's skyline flickered against the darkened horizon, illuminating the ghosts of broken lives, the seeds of ruin had already taken root in the most unexpected places. In one crowded diner on the outskirts of the downtown district, a disheveled man recounted in a voice heavy with remorse and disbelief his own brush with the scandal. "I used to think justice was black and white," he said. leaning across the cracked formica table as if to share a universal truth. But now I see that even the supposed symbols of law and order can drown in shades of gray. The story of that night was just beginning to unfold in public memory, a narrative of betrayal that entwined the personal with the political, the sacred with the profane. And as Detective Alvarez took one last look at the evidence spread before him, a collage of photos, documents, and digital trails, the gravity of his task pressed in on him, leaving no space for solace or escape. Every whispered voice, every tearful apology recorded in the fading light of dawn testified to a truth that was as damning as the legacy of the judge herself. In the frayed tapestry of broken relationships and shattered ideals, the case had become a mirror reflecting a society in crisis, one where the veneer of civility had long been eroded by the relentless assault of power and the unyielding demands of personal survival. The investigation's trajectory soon took a darker, more labyrinthine twist that forced even the most jaded members of the department to confront the possibility that nothing in their world was as it seemed. It began with an innocuous piece of evidence that had, until then, languished in the recesses of an overburdened evidence room, a series of encrypted text messages recovered from the judge's personal phone. These messages, innocuous at first glance, slowly revealed a pattern of communication that spanned months and hinted at unsanctioned meetings and illicit rendezvous. One such message read in terse digital fragments, "Meet at 3, repeat, don't let anyone know," a simple instruction that belied the gravity of its content. As forensic analysts painstakingly deciphered the code, it became clear that the texts were exchanged with none other than Cyrus Delgado, the inmate whose dangerous charm had ensnared Lydia's heart and loyalty alike. The discovery sent ripples through the investigative team, as it not only provided a tangible link between the judge and the prisoner, but also raised unsettling questions about the extent to which the corruption had infected the upper echelons of the legal system. In a rare moment of unguarded vulnerability, Marcus recorded a voice memo on his aging phone, the static-laden background testament to the fragile clarity of his thoughts. "There's a darkness here," he murmured, the words reverberating in a quiet apartment room that had become his sanctuary from the world's relentless hostility. "A rot so deep that even the foundations of justice are shaking. I can't help but feel that the truth will ultimately tear us all apart." That night, under the oppressive weight of 1,000 unanswered questions, the detective's dreams were haunted by images of a frantic girl running through rain-soaked corridors. Claire, whose fleeting smile had been forever stolen by the betrayal of blood and trust. In one such nightmare, the echo of her voice murmured, "I only wanted to know the truth," before the world around her dissolved into chaotic fragments of shattered glass and endless darkness. Meanwhile, in a secluded interrogation room at the precinct, a gaunt, weary witness recounted the final moments before the murder with a trembling cadence that conveyed both terror and profound sorrow. "I heard her voice," the witness whispered, eyes darting around as if the very walls might betray him. "I heard her pleading and then silence. It was as if everything stopped in that moment, like the world held its breath." His words, choked by emotion, reverberated through the sterile air, forming a grim counterpoint to the calculated madness that had gripped Judge Marlowe's soul. Deep within the recesses of her memory, Lydia recalled the moment that had irrevocably changed the course of her life. A clandestine meeting behind the cold, industrial confines of the detention center, where Cyrus awaited his fate. There, in a moment of desperate abandon, she had surrendered to temptation, forsaking the principles she once held dear. The memory was a ghost that now haunted her every waking hour, a specter that twisted every smile into a grimace and turned every gesture of affection into a silent admission of guilt. As the evidence mounted and whispers of conspiracy began to circulate through the corridors of power, the city found itself divided between outrage and a morbid curiosity that propelled it into a frenzy of speculation and judgment. Late-night radio shows, public access television, and tear-stained editorials in local newspapers all bore testimony to a collective shock that defied simple explanation. "It's like a movie," one reporter remarked during a live broadcast, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and grim satisfaction. A story where those we trust to protect us are the very ones who tear our lives apart. For Detective Alvarez, every new revelation was a reminder that the line between right and wrong was not drawn in bold leaf but smeared in shades of regret and reluctant resignation. Each conversation with a reluctant witness, each staccato recording of a desperate confession chipped away at his belief in an unbiased system. In the solemn silence of the midnight interrogation room, as he flipped through pages of evidence strewn about like discarded puzzle pieces, he couldn't help but feel the crushing inevitability of tragedy, a force as relentless as gravity itself. I keep asking myself, he confided in a late-night interview with a local news station, his voice a measured tremor, how did we allow ourselves to be so blind? How did we let the people entrusted with our lives become the architects of our undoing? With every tremulous admission and every heart-wrenching testimony, the investigation took on the weight of a damnation that seemed both personal and universal. It was no longer merely a case to be solved, but a testament to a world where every secret, every betrayal carried within it a potential for catastrophic collapse. As rain continued to fall on the city's darkened streets, mingling with the sweat and sorrow of those ensnared in this tragedy, Detective Marcus Alvarez braced himself for the next phase of a journey that promised no redemption, only the relentless, unyielding march toward an uncertain, haunted truth. In the days that followed the initial shock, as dusk bled relentlessly into a long, dreary dawn, the investigation unraveled layers that had once been thought impenetrable, revealing fissures in a family once believed to be inviolable. The father, once painted as a helpless victim ensnared in a web of deceit, began to show signs of his own complexity. His eyes, bloodshot from endless nights of solitary grief and self-recrimination, betrayed the notion that his guilt was entirely fabricated. Beneath the veneer of a broken man lay secrets of his own, confessions long buried beneath the pressures of an unyielding societal role. In hushed exchanges during forensic meetings, one detective noted, "There's something contradictory about him. It's as if every lie he's fed us is layered over an unspeakable truth." That truth, slowly chipping away at the meticulously orchestrated narrative, was revealed in the margins of a forgotten ledger, a series of transactions coded in a numeric cipher that hinted at illicit dealings and covert attempts at financial manipulation. Through painstaking analysis, investigators discovered that the father had been funneling money to an obscure account, one that later emerged as a linchpin in a broader network of corruption that extended beyond mere family dynamic. The threads began to interweave, a narrative of compromised loyalties, debts owed to dangerous figures, and a quiet desperation that had ultimately rendered him vulnerable to manipulation. In one recorded conversation with his defense attorney, his voice, low and tremulous, revealed his inner agony. "They say I'm innocent of the murder, but what about the other crimes?" he questioned, staring at a ceiling that reflected the sterile lights of the interrogation room. His words, laden with regret and an ambiguous sense of culpability, resonated with Detective Alvarez, who saw in him a mirror of his own internal struggles. The case was no longer a simple matter of right versus wrong. It had morphed into a sprawling tableau of moral decay, where every actor was ensnared in a web of conflicting motivations and buried sins. A pivotal moment came one bleak morning when a retired corrections officer, whose career had been overshadowed by a deep-seated sense of guilt, agreed to speak with the investigators. In an interview recorded on a battered handheld device, the officer's voice wavered with the weight of decades of regret as he recounted his time spent alongside Cyrus Delgado in the prison corridors. "I remember the way Cyrus looked at Judge Marlowe," he said, his tone both haunting and remorseful. "It wasn't just lust, it was a kind of desperation, as if she were trying to escape from something too monstrous to name." That statement, resonating against the backdrop of mounting evidence, began to cast the inmate not simply as a willing partner in vice, but as a victim of circumstances as twisted and fraught as those that plagued the family he had entwined himself with. The courtroom soon became a theater of raw human emotion, each day marked by explosive cross-examinations and impassioned witness testimonies. The public watched, transfixed, as layers of meticulously hidden truths were stripped bare, revealing a portrait of a society where the lines between justice and vengeance blurred beyond recognition. In a rare moment of candor on the stand, Detective Alvarez admitted, "This isn't just a case, it's a reflection of every broken promise and every betrayal that has ever gone unpunished in our city." His admission, broadcast on live television and replayed on social media, ignited a firestorm of debate among citizens who had long believed that the system was capable of delivering true retribution. Meanwhile, in the shadow of the gavel, Judge Marlowe remained a study in cold, calculated control, even as her carefully constructed facade began to crumble under the relentless inquiry. Late at night, when the courtroom lights dimmed and the echoes of gavel strikes faded into silence, an inner monologue revealed the conflict she fought to contain. "I did what I had to do," she would whisper to the darkness, her voice trembling with a mix of defiance and sorrow. "In a world where truth is as fickle as the wind, I alone held the power to preserve the order I knew, even if it meant damning my own flesh and blood." Her internal confessions, recorded in the secret pages of a journal that later surfaced during the trial, painted a portrait of a woman tormented by her own ambition and the crushing pressure of legacy. It was in these handwritten pages, scrawled in frantic loops and desperate flourishes, that the final pieces of a tragedy were assembled. A story of forbidden love, of betrayal, and of a calculated framing designed to deflect not only suspicion but also the crushing weight of personal failure. As the trial entered its penultimate phase, every revelation seemed to echo with the finality of an irreversible act, sealing the fate of everyone involved. The intricate web of deceit had ensnared not only those with the power to judge, but also those who had once trusted in the sanctity of justice. And as the jury prepared to deliver a verdict that would reverberate through the corridors of power in the hearts of a shattered community, the murmur of a final, unyielding truth began to emerge from beneath the rubble of lies. One that promised that no matter how hard one fought to suppress the darker aspects of human desire, the truth would ultimately claw its way into the light. When the long-awaited day of reckoning finally dawned, the courthouse was a battleground of emotions, each spectator and jury member burdened with the weight of collective remorse and scorn. In the hushed corridors leading to the courtroom, hushed whispers recalled fleeting moments of happiness now irrevocably marred by the carnage of deceit. One by one, witnesses took the stand, their voices quavering as they recounted the intimate moments of betrayal that had led to the final, irrevocable act. In one such recollection, a young neighbor described how the once familiar laughter of a little girl had given way to a piercing, anguished cry, a sound that haunted the nights and refused to fade into oblivion. "It felt as if the world had stopped spinning," she murmured during a recorded interview, tears blending with the soft hum of grief and recrimination. In that moment, nothing was as it should be. The trial, conducted with the relentless efficiency of a machine doomed to repeat the same cycle of corruption and retribution, was punctuated by sudden outbursts of raw emotion. As the evidence was laid bare, a mosaic of damning texts, carefully concealed video footage, and the lingering presence of a love turned monstrous, each new detail sent shockwaves through an already fractured community. In the dim light of the courtroom, as shadows stretched across time-worn wood and the metallic scent of anticipation mingled with despair, Detective Alvarez found himself wrestling not only with the inescapable melancholy of the case, but also with the profound realizations about the nature of justice. "Every lie," he confided to a trusted colleague in a moment of rare openness, "feeds a deeper truth. And sometimes that truth is far more devastating than the lie itself." As the testimony continued, a final twist unraveled with the insidious precision of a well-practiced con artist, a previously unknown witness, a quiet, unassuming janitor who had served in the courthouse for decades, stepped forward with a confession that shattered the narrative constructed by powerful elites. In a voice that trembled with both courage and the weight of long-held secrets, he revealed that on the night of the murder, he had witnessed figures moving stealthily near a side entrance, their actions too deliberate to be mere chance. "I saw shadows where there should have been none," he said, his words imbued with a quiet urgency that belied his unremarkable appearance. I saw a plan unfolding before my eyes, a plan that left no room for redemption. The janitor's words, recorded and later corroborated by forensic evidence, cast a damning light on the sequence of events that had unfolded in that fateful hour, irrevocably linking the judge's actions to a premeditated effort to cast suspicion away from herself. With the jury now immersed in a whirlpool of conflicting testimonies and undeniable proof, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the courtroom fell silent as the lead prosecutor laid out the chilling implications of the evidence. A meticulously orchestrated stratagem designed to shift blame from the true perpetrator onto an unsuspecting, vulnerable figure. It was a masterstroke of deception, one that had long been the hallmark of those who believed that the ends justified the means, regardless of the human cost. The father, once reluctantly ensnared in the web of suspicion, now stood on the precipice of absolution and ruin. His fate, inextricably tied to every misdeed that had been committed in the shadow of this scandal. In a hushed final exchange that resonated with the palpable sorrow of a man who had lost everything, he whispered to his defense attorney, "I never wanted any of this. I only wanted to do what was right." His plea, recorded in the grim pages of trial transcripts and broadcast to a city hungry for justice, was met with a mixture of pity and admonishment by those who had once cast him aside, and as the final hours of the trial drew near, the air in the courtroom grew heavy with the collective sense of inevitability, a dread that suggested that even the most hardened of souls could not escape the consequences of their actions. In that charged atmosphere of blame and remorse, each heartbeat, each quiet inhalation became a testament to the cost of choices made in darkness. With the closing arguments delivered in voices that trembled between fury and despair, the jury retired to deliberate, leaving behind a silence that spoke of a community forever altered by the twisted machinations of power and betrayal. Outside the courthouse, under the indifferent gaze of a bruised sky, the city braced itself for the verdict, a verdict that would either redeem or damn them all. The legacy of Judge Marlowe, the haunting memory of a lost child, and the fractured soul of a father who had been manipulated into culpability would soon find their final expression in the unforgiving language of justice. As the first rays of dawn crept across the horizon, promising nothing more than a fragile hope in the wake of unspeakable horror, Detective Alvarez stood alone before the courthouse steps, grappling with the profound realization that in the pursuit of truth, even the most noble aspirations could be tainted by the corrosive influence of human frailty. His eyes, reflecting a mingling of sorrow, anger, and resigned determination, scanned the gathered faces etched with the lines of countless unspoken tragedies. In that moment, he understood that the case was not merely a collection of damning documents and fractured testimonies, but a mirror held up to a society in which every act of betrayal carried with it a deeper wound. And so, with the slow, deliberate cadence of a man burdened by the weight of innumerable sins, he vowed to continue the search for a truth that, however elusive, was the only salve for a world starved for redemption. The city's heartbeat, steady and unyielding despite the turmoil that had rocked its foundations, seemed to murmur a quiet promise that even in darkness, the light of truth, once kindled, could never be fully extinguished. In the long aftermath of the trial, as the collective shock began to ebb into a somber resignation, and the urban landscape slowly resumed its relentless rhythm, the scars of that tragic night continued to fester in whispered rumors and tearful recollections. Detective Marcus Alvarez, now both haunted and defined by the case, spent long hours in solitude at his modest apartment, where the echoes of his relentless pursuit of justice left him questioning the very nature of redemption. Amid scattered case files and half-finished reports, he replayed in his mind the final moments of the trial, the anguished cries, the tearful glances exchanged between estranged family members, and the haunting silence that had followed as the gavel struck for the last time. In the faded light of dusk, he would wander aimlessly through the city's labyrinthine streets, seeking solace in the muted conversations of late-night vendors and the melancholic strains of a distant saxophone. The urban sprawl, with its imposing skyscrapers and narrow, winding alleys, had become a character in its own right, a silent witness to the myriad tragedies and fleeting moments of beauty intermingled in everyday life. The fallout from the case redefined the contours of trust and betrayal among those who had once taken pride in the solemn institutions that governed them. In hushed tones, former colleagues and adversaries alike recounted how Judge Marlowe's carefully orchestrated facade had unraveled, revealing the stark vulnerability that lay beneath a veneer of authority. Investigative journalists, driven by a need to expose the corruption that had infected even the most revered of offices, pored over court records and confidential memos, each new revelation sparking a flurry of public indignation and protests in the streets. "They trusted us to be beacons of hope," one reporter lamented on a late-night broadcast, only to discover that our faith was misplaced in a system rigged by human ambition and haunted by personal demons. The father, whose life had been turned upside down by a series of events he could scarcely control, was eventually exonerated of the murder charges, but the price of his release was a legacy of stigma and irreparable damage to the family name. In quiet moments at home, he would stare at a faded photograph of his daughter Claire, the memory of her radiant smile now forever eclipsed by the bitterness of betrayal and the cruelty of fate. "I wanted nothing more than to protect her," he confessed in a somber interview with a local morning show, his voice cracking with the weight of unspoken grief. "But, in trying to do so, I became ensnared in a trap set by those I once trusted." These poignant admissions, laid bare for all to hear, resonated deeply with a public already disillusioned by the revelations of the scandal. The city, scarred by the echoes of a collective tragedy, slowly began to question the very foundations of its moral compass. In quiet community meetings and heated debates in cramped coffee shops, citizens sought to understand how the guardians of justice could fall so far from grace, and what measures could be taken to ensure that such a betrayal would never occur again. As months turned into years, the legacy of the case metamorphosed into a cautionary tale, a testament to the inescapable consequences of unchecked power and the fragility of human integrity. Detective Alvarez, whose relentless pursuit of truth had come at the cost of his own peace, left behind a body of work that was both celebrated and scrutinized. His meticulous recordings, laden with raw emotion and searing honesty, were later compiled into a series of documentaries that not only chronicled the case, but also served as a rallying cry for reform within the justice system. In one final, reflective moment during a recorded interview at a community center, he summed up the pervasive melancholy of the era. "We all carry our demons," he said softly, his gaze fixed on a horizon that promised both despair and hope in equal measure. "And sometimes the quest for truth forces us to confront the darkness within, not to cast blame, but to understand the flawed human condition that binds us all." Even as the city pressed on, scarred yet determined to reclaim its dignity, the echoes of that tragic chapter continued to reverberate in quiet corners of memory. In the hushed corridors of courtrooms, long silent, in the tear-streaked diaries of those who had suffered unendurable loss, and in the whispered recollections of a community that had glimpsed the very heart of its own corruption, the cautionary tale of Judge Marlowe, her illicit entanglements, and the irreversible price of forbidden love endured as a somber reminder that in a world where truth is often hidden beneath layers of deceit, only by confronting our innermost failures can we hope to find redemption. And so, beneath an urban sky stained with both the fading hues of twilight and the unyielding promise of a new day, the story remained, a testament to the complexities of love, power, and the indelible scars left by betrayal, urging all who heard it to look within and acknowledge that even in the darkest of nights, the search for light is a journey worth enduring.